Hey guys, it's me, Jambros, and I am back with my last individual class loot guide for Phase 5, and this time it'll be for Feral Druids. After this video, I'll be getting to a per-item comparison between classes in Sunwell, and then finally moving on to some pre-patch and Wrath of the Lich King work. First, let's start with some of the methodology I use in these item comparisons. All the sims were made with the TBC cat sim. Still not my favorite sim, just because of how incredibly tedious it is to use, but it's the only real tool available for Feral Druids at the moment. All appropriate raid, party, and personal buffs and debuffs will be applied here. Purely single target. These sims are done against the high armor boss, but any low armor target changes will be explained as well. These sims use complete gear sets and don't just sim individual items. When swapping pieces for testing, some pieces may be changed out for other pieces to keep a maximum DPS output. For example, changing one item around to keep a 2-piece or 4-piece bonus, or changing gems to keep a required hit rating. All sims use full BIS gear for Phase 5, compares the best in slot item to the next best items in that slot. While the default sim is a 7700 armor demon, aka Brutalist or Muru, but not as adds, the rest are 6200 armor, and gearing differences will be explained. I might have quite a few people disagree with me here on the spec, but it was made with maximum DPS potential kept in mind. This is a monocat build, and not used for any bear tanking versatility, as evidenced by not filling out Feral Instinct or Thick Hide, and instead putting the points into Feral Aggression. And here's what you'll be looking at when you're full Phase 5 best in slot, just to give you a little idea. There are a couple different item changes you can make here, so we'll get into that now, starting with the Helm. This slot has a little more to it than normal, because you notice just how close so many options are to each other. Not only that, but that the Wolf's Head Helm may finally be unseated as the undisputable BIS. As you collect more and more Sunwell gear, the stat inflation starts to trend your Helm preference towards a more traditional one with a meta socket. Wolf's Head is still incredibly competitive, especially if you have a Feral tank maintaining Mangle. The actual best overall configuration is using the Helm as your 4th piece to complete the 4-set bonus. The other 3 non-Wolf's Head options are all hit options, which make them slightly less valuable compared to the non-hit tier piece. It's so close though, and if you haven't obtained one of your preferred hit pieces in another slot, then these could all be very useful. If you're a jewel crafter, the crafted neck is technically the best item you can put in the slot, but it is not significantly better than some of the following options. While it may sim about 13 DPS better than the clutch or the choker of Endless Nightmares, which is a useful Black Temple hit item, you could consider switching out jewel crafting for Ring Enchants or something instead. The braided Eternium chain is 53 whole DPS behind, which is actually less of a DPS loss than pretty much any other DPS class. Feral Druid remains pretty much the only viable spec to actually use this neck piece and potentially provide a raid DPS increase, but you can't use this every pull, even if you wanted to, so you'll need one of the other necks regardless. The Demon 2 shoulder pads are best in slot for Feral Druids, but it is very, very close between that and using the tier 6 shoulders as the 4-piece completer as opposed to using the Helm. They are so close that it really just doesn't matter. It really is just a matter of which slot you can upgrade to some level gear first, and then you just gotta run with it. If you do opt to use the Demon Tooth shoulders as an off piece, it's your only option. The Season 4 Arena shoulders and shoulder pads of Behemoths, which you actually trade in for Demon Tooth, are more than 40 DPS behind. There's only one new cloak in Phase 5, and it's this cloak off of Kil'jaeden. Everybody wants it, every physical DPS. So you'll have to convince somebody else to give it to you, or I suppose you could just give it to yourself if you're part of the obviously corrupt loot council. Otherwise, the 3 closest options are all pretty similar. The Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape is best if you can make use of the hit rating. Otherwise, the Thalassian Wilder Cloak from TK is still a great option, and Dory's Embrace is really just easy to acquire. The Bladed Chaos Tunic is the best item you can take for your chest piece in terms of damage dealing. None of the other items are super close. The next closest is actually the item you trade in to get the tunic, and may be more useful for tanking. So those 2 items are essentially just one, and you'll be forced to choose which version of that item you want. Your other options are all about the same. The Bind Down Pickup Leatherworking chest suffers from having a ton of hit in the slot, but could potentially be your best option if you really need it. Otherwise, you'll most likely be sticking with the tier 6 chest here for a while. For the first of the new tier pieces, this is a large upgrade of your next best item, but the new PvP bracers, although 56 DPS behind the new tier bracers, can be a pretty quick, although moderate upgrade over your Phase 4 best in slot. Personally, I wouldn't bother. You're on a less contested Vanquisher token, and you should be pretty high up on the list for these. The gloves should be one of the easiest upgrade slots. The gloves of Immortal Dusk are a leatherworking craft, but these are bind on equip instead of pickup, so they can be made for you by somebody else. Nothing really compares here. They should be a priority since they're so easy to get. The Muru gloves are not worth it, even though nobody else really wants them either. And using the gloves as a 4-tier piece is fine, but not the best. Just get these crafted. For the second of the 3 new tier pieces, the belt features a ridiculously large gap between it and the previously best in Phase 2 belt of 100s, about 62 DPS. What I would like to note here is that there is a new third option that approaches the usefulness of 100 deaths if you haven't gotten your new token yet and never gotten the Vash belt. The Belt of the Silent Path is new in Phase 5 and nowhere close to overall BIS, but if you have 75 badges to spare, it could be a nice temporary upgrade. For the leg slot, the leggings of the Immortal Knight are one of the most important in your entire set. Much of the rest of your gear depends on this hit rating in an optimal setup. Unfortunately, these things are super contested, and if you tank more often, then you may be forced into picking up the leggings of the Immortal Beast instead. This is unfortunate, and you'll have to do some convincing or get very lucky with drops to acquire this piece. The Trousers of the Scryer's Retainer is a new badge piece, which keeps the hit rating in the slot, but you're really kind of just better off using the tier 6 legs, which also have hit. This sim here has the tier legs as a 4th piece for your 4-set bonus, which frees up space for your helm and shoulders to be used as off pieces. This is far from optimal, but is also an extremely likely scenario for you to be in while gearing up. The boots are the last of the 3 new tier pieces and are a high priority item for you. This is a very large gap in DPS here, but it is a little deceptive. The Tabby boots and Shadow Masters are both closer than they seem, but freeing up hit rating or a tier piece slot really makes a large difference. Regardless, as long as you're doing well in hit rating, make the switch as soon as you can. If you still need the hit while gearing, then stick with the Tabby boots. The new PvP item and the Sunrage treads from Magister Terrace kind of represent the floor of what your gear should be if you're working on a new character. The rings for a Feral Druid are some of the easiest to acquire for all physical DPS. While the BIS for everybody Band of Ruinous Delight is also BIS for you, it's by a very small amount. The 2 almost identical armor pen rings, the Signet of Primal Wrath and Angelisa's Revenge, are acquired in a 10-man raid and with badges of justice respectively. Any combination of these 3 rings are within 5 DPS of each other. The Bind Down Equip Hardcorium Band is not quite as good for Ferals because of the haste rating on it. I'd pass on spending the gold for it. It sims here about the same as Stormrage Signet Ring, but the Signet Ring is much more valuable while gearing up, as it is an independently very strong item, especially if you can use the hit rating on it. Here are some of your trinket options available. There are 2 new standouts here, and they significantly outperform the rest of your options. The Shard of Contempt is obtained from Heroic Magister Terrace, and if you don't have it already, you should be running that instance as much as you can until you do. The Black Indenary Sliver is much harder to obtain, not only dropping from Muru, but pretty much everybody else wants it as well. Until then, Madness of the Betrayer is your best option. Tsunami Talisman is behind that, but not by a terribly large amount, and if you are raiding then, is something you likely got in Phase 2. Titles are pretty straightforward. For the highest personal DPS, you take Everbloom. Terror is always worse than that, even if you have to keep Mangle up. Raven Goddess is your next best option. It's technically the highest total raid DPS increase, as it adds 20 crit to everybody in your group as well. There are a few new weapon options in Phase 5. All of them are upgrades to the previous weapons available in Phase 4, but one in particular really stands out. The Stanchion of Primal Instinct off Eridar Twins is more than 130 DPS better than the next best weapon, the Season 4 Staff, which you should honestly not even bother with unless you only PvP and don't raid at all. The Staff for the Forest Lord is bought with 150 badges and is a good immediate upgrade to any of the Phase 4 weapons. This would normally be the part where I'd explain what swaps you need to make on your gear and whatnot, since the high and low armor bosses in Sunwell, since there's so much armor pen on those new gear, but Feral Druid is incredibly easy for this. Here's a chart with the remaining armor mounts for the high and low armor targets. The cap for low armor is 1708 armor pen, since you don't use the Executioner enchant. In full Sunwell Abyss, a cat druid will have 1571 armor pen. As long as you don't exceed 1708 armor pen, then you're good. Probably the easiest way to do that is if you're using Madness of the Betrayer, which has a proc for 300, so there is potential to be wasting some of that proc. This is a pretty good trinket for you, and shouldn't really be replaced until you get the Blackened Nauru Sliver if you ever get it. You'll never waste a proc on high armor bosses, but against low armor, to get 100% of its value, its soft cap is 1408. It's okay to go a little above this, as a proc doesn't really have a full uptime, but the Madness does start to lose value above that point. And that's it. This concludes the Phase 5 Feral Druid loot guide and my last class-specific loot guide as well. Next up will be the item-specific comparison between classes. If you're looking forward to that and enjoy content like this, then please help support this channel by liking this video or subscribing. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Or you can come watch me on Twitch and ask me there.